This is the homework video guide for powers with whole number exponents, and for the very first question I need to identify the base and the exponent for each of the following problems. So for this very first question, 8 to the power 3, the base is just this highlighted number there, so the base here is going to be 8, and the exponent is just going to be the power there, and the power here is going to be 3, so the exponent is 3. And that's it for this first problem here. We're just identifying the base and the exponent here. All right, for the next one here, my base is going to be 2, and my power here is just a variable x, so the exponent is x. For the next one here, the base is everything in that bracket, so which is negative x, and my power is 4, so the exponent is 4. For the next one here, 3 divided by 4 to the power 6. Well, the base is everything in the bracket there, so the base is going to be 3 divided by 4, and the exponent here is going to be the power, which is 6. And that's it for the very first question here. So let's move on to question number 2. And for question number 2, we need to state the coefficient for each of the following. So the coefficient is generally the number that's in front of the variable here. So in this case, the coefficient is 5. For the next one, the coefficient is the number in front of the variable there, so the coefficient here is going to be negative 6. For the next one here, if I take a look at a to the power 3, the number in front of the variable is an invisible 1, so my coefficient is a 1. For letter D, I have a 4 on the denominator, so you can actually write this as 1 over 4 times y to the power 3. So the number that's in front of my variable is now 1 over 4, so the coefficient is 1 over 4. And we can use the same idea for letter E here. So the 5 and the 8, I can just pull that to the front. So 5 divided by 8 multiplied by y to the power of 9, so that the number in front of the variable is 5 over 8. So the coefficient for letter E is 5 divided by 8. Okay, let's move on to question number 3 now. So for question number 3, I need to write each of the following as a repeated multiplication here. Okay, so for the very first one, I have c to the power 4. The power is 4, so if I write this as a repeated multiplication, this would be just c times c times c times c, and that's it. For letter B here, I see the coefficient 5. We can leave the 5 out there. And then we have x to the power 3, so we write that as a repeated multiplication. So x times x times x. Okay. For letter C now, everything in the bracket is being raised to the power 2. Okay, so if you want to write everything in the bracket as AB times AB, this is totally fine. And if you want to just combine or let the letters be with the letters, this will be the same thing as A times A, and then B times B. Okay, so you can use the answer in the green font or the answer in the black font. Both answers are correct. And for letter D, once again, I have the brackets right. So everything in the bracket is going to be written as a repeated multiplication. So negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. And that's it. For letter E, I have s to the power 2, so the s gets written as a repeated multiplication as s times s, and then we have just the letter t that's just hanging around. For letter F here, this 2 here, the 2 does not have a power to it, so we leave the 2 alone. But then we take a look at the brackets, right? The bracket is being raised to the power 3, so I can have a bracket of 5 over 4 times bracket 5 over 4, and then times bracket 5 over 4. So it's everything inside the bracket that's being raised to the power 3, right? The 2 is not being raised to a power 3, so we just leave that alone. Okay, so same idea with letter H. I have a coefficient of 3, so the 3 can remain. And then I have the letter C, so the C can be multiplied. And then finally, I have d to the power 2, right? So I can write that as a repeated multiplication there. So 3 times c times d times d. And for letter I, this is very similar. I still have a coefficient of 3. But now the bracket is being raised to the power 2. So I can write this as bracket cd, close bracket, and another bracket cd. So that's totally fine, and that's totally worth full marks. If you want to write this correctly, you can put the number in front. And then you can combine the c's there, right? So c times c, and then d times d. All right, so both answers are correct. And then finally for letter J here, everything in the brackets is being raised to the power 2. So in theory, it's really 3CD in a bracket times by another 3CD in a bracket. And if you wanted to write this out separately, you can combine the 3's. So 3 times 3, and then C times C, and then finally D times D. All right, so those are all good questions so that you can write this out as a repeated multiplication. Okay, let's move on to the next set of questions here. This is question number 4. We'll go to question number 4b. So these are very good questions to know. I'm going to start with letter C here because when you have a bracket being raised to the power, sometimes this is a little bit easier to think about because it's everything in the bracket that's being written as a repeated multiplication. So -5 times -5 is positive 25. Okay, where else in letter B here, it's really the 5 to the power 2. That's being written as a repeated multiplication, and this minus sign is just tagging along. So the final answer here is a negative, and 5 times 5 is 25. All right, so letters B and C are different because of where the brackets are placed, so make sure you know the difference between B and C. And letters D and E almost have the same kind of concept here. So whenever you have brackets, this is a little bit easier to write as a repeated multiplication here. This is -5 times -5 times -5. And you should know that when you have 3 negative signs, an odd number of negative signs, that means your final answer is going to be negative. And 5 times 5 is 25. And 25 times 5 is 125. So the final answer here is -125. And for letter E, I have 5 to the power 3, which is 5 times 5 times 5. And then you have this minus sign that's tagging along. So this answer is going to be negative. And then 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. So this answer is also -125. And for letter F, if you want to write this as a repeated multiplication, you can. Usually you should be able to look at this and then just by examination know what the final answer is. So if I multiply 3 times 3 times 3, that's going to be 27. And then if I also multiply 5 times 5 times 5, that's going to be 125. So 27 over 125 is the final answer. Okay, let's keep on moving along. So then for question number 5a, I need to evaluate without a calculator here. Okay, so 10 to the power 2. Well, 10 to the power 2 is 100. And then you have this negative sign that's tagging along, so the answer there is going to be -100. For letter B, since I have the brackets there, if you want to write this as a repeated multiplication, it's just -10 times -10. And since you have 2 negative signs, the final answer will be positive, right? So positive 100. All right, so 10 to the power 3, that's 10 times 10 times 10. So 10 times 10 times 10, and that's going to be 1,000. And then you also have this minus sign that's tagging along. So -1,000 is the final answer for that one. And for letter D, since you have brackets there, it's just -10 times -10 times -10. And that's also going to be -1,000. All right, so that's it for question 5D. Okay, let's move on to a few more. So question number 7, we need to evaluate without using a calculator here. A general rule here is anything to the power 0 is always going to be 1. So 32 to the power 0 is going to be a 1. Okay, and for letter B there, this part right here in green, that's the 1. But then you have this negative sign that's tagging along, so that's -1. And for letter C, anything to the power 0 is always going to be 1. And for letter D here, let me kind of box this to brackets, right? So when you think about bed mass, we always do brackets first. So 4 to the power 0 is 1. And then you multiply by this coefficient of a half. So a half times 1 is just going to be a half. Over here, if you went ahead and multiply those together, you have 4 to the power 0. And then you have the 1/2 in front. And once again, anything to the power 0 is going to be 1. And then 1 times a half is still going to be a half. So there you go. So for 7e, the answer is also going to be 1/2. Okay, so move on to a few more questions here. Okay, for these questions here, we're just going to write in a simpler form. I'm not going to ask you to evaluate because some of these numbers are actually quite difficult to compute in your head. So when we're multiplying, and if the bases are the same, the bases are 9, right? So if the bases are the same, we just add the powers. So this would be 9 to the power of 3 plus 6. And 9 to the power of 3 plus 6 is going to be 9 to the power of 9. And that's it. I'm just going to leave my answer as just 9 to the power of 9 because this is actually quite difficult to compute without a calculator. For letter B, you just multiply the powers there. So 7 to the power of 2 times 3, and that's going to be 7 to the power of 6, and that's it. For letter C, if I'm dividing and if the bases are the same, right? If the bases are the same, what you're doing is you're subtracting the powers. So 8 to the 15 minus 13, and this would be 8 to the power of 2. 8 to the power of 2, and 8 to the power of 2 is going to be 64. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. Okay, so let's figure this out. So I have 2/3. So there's like a 1 and a 3. So 1 and a 3, right? So that's 2 to the power of 1 plus 3, all divided by, and there's also an invisible 1 here. So that's going to be 3 to the power of 1 plus, and then this 3 goes down there as well. So 1 plus 3 there. Okay, so this will be 2 to the power of 4, all divided by 3 to the power of 4. And 2 to the power of 4 is going to be 16, and 3 to the power of 4 is going to be 81. Okay, so that's it for that one. Let's move on to the next one here. So this one here, we're just dividing. So if we're dividing, we just take the powers, 7 and 5, and we subtract them. So 7 minus 5. So this is 1.5 to the power of 2. And that's it for that one. I'm not going to do this one. I'm not going to move forward. For letter F, this one's a bit difficult because the negative sign is in the bracket, right? So if you have a power 2 there, this would be a negative 3 to the power of 3. So we're going to write this as a repeated multiplication. And then you'll notice that if I have a negative and a negative, that gives me a positive, right? So I get a positive answer because when you have an even number of negative signs, your final result will be positive. And then we can just add these powers here, which will be 3 to the power of 6. Okay, so that one you do have to write as a repeated multiplication there so that you can get the final answer as 3 to the power of 6. For letter G, since the bases are the same, you just add these. So 6 plus 2 is going to be 8, so negative 5 to the power of 8. And this one here, you just add all these powers, right? So 3 plus 4 plus 2, and if you add that all up, you get 4 to the power of 9. All right, so you're just adding the powers there if you're multiplying when the bases are all the same. Okay, let's move on to a few other questions here. Question number 10 here. So use the product law to simplify. So we can just jump to the final answer for these ones. If the bases are the same, you just add the powers, right? So 4 plus 2 is going to be 6, a to the power of 6. Next one, 6 plus 3 is going to be 9, so m to the power of 9. 5 plus 5 is 10, so s to the power of 10. 6 plus 5 is going to be 11, so x to the power of 11. And 10 plus 2 is going to be 12, so y to the power of 12. And that's it. That's a quick little rapid fire there. For question number 6, use the quotient law to simplify. Okay, so we should be able to do this a little bit quicker. So if we're dividing, we just subtract the power. So 8 minus 2 is going to be 6, so t to the power of 6. If we're over here, if you see the division sign, I mean, this is the same thing as x to the power 6 over x to the power 4. So when we're dividing and the bases are the same, you just subtract the powers. So 6 minus 4 is going to be 2, x to the power 2. This is going to be p to the power of 10 minus 9, so p to the power 1, and p to the power 1 is just p. This one here, we're taking 18 minus 9, so 18 minus 9 is going to be 9, so d to the power 9. Over here, there's an invisible 1 here, so 8 minus 1 is going to be 7, so p to the power of 7. Okay, let's keep on moving along here. Use the power of product laws to simplify here. So these are all pretty good ones here, so let me kind of highlight the 5 here. And all you're really doing is you're just kind of distributing the 5 onto the both variables. So this would be x to the power of 5 and y to the power of 5. So that's a one-step problem. Next one here, you're just distributing the power there, so that's n to the power of 4. And if I distribute that over here, I get m to the power of 4, right? So very similar to the first two problems there are quite similar. Over here, if I distribute this 3 here, that'll be x to the power of 3. And then you gotta be careful here. This 3 is being distributed over there, so it's really 3 to the power of 3, right? So 3 to the power of 3 is going to be 27, and then x to the power of 3. Okay, similar idea over here. So if I kind of like distribute that power there, I get z to the power of 3. And then this 3 is being distributed on that 10, so that's really 10 to the power of 3. And 10 to the power of 3 is going to be 1,000, so 1,000, and then z to the power of 3. Okay. Over here, this 2 will distribute onto the c, so c to the power of 2, and then you have the 1/2, and that's being raised to the power of 2, right? So if you want to do a side calculation right here, so 1/2 times 1/2 is going to be 1/4, right? So 1/4. So the final answer here is going to be 1/4, and then you have c to the power of 2. Okay, let's move on. This one here you might want to think about here. I would write this as a repeated multiplication here. Anytime there's a negative inside the brackets, you want to be careful there. And since you have an odd number of negative signs, the final answer will be negative. And if you multiply x times x times x, you just get x to the power of 3. So that's it for that particular question there. For letter H here, okay, so we have these negative, we do have these like a negative expression inside the brackets here. So let me kind of show you another quicker way to do this question here. So I have y to the power of 4. And then when this 4 gets distributed on the negative 3, just write it as a bracket, negative 3 to the power of 4. Okay, and then that will be a little bit easier to kind of think about. So negative 3 to the power of 4, if you think about this, this is really like negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So the final answer will be positive there, and 3 times 3 times 3, or 3 to the power of 4 in general is going to be 81. And then you have just a y to the power of 4, which is tagging along there. Okay, so 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 3 is 27, and 27 times 3 is 81. And the final answer will be positive because there are an even number of negative signs. Okay, let's see if we can apply that concept to letter I now. So if I just go backwards here, this would be q to the power of 2. And then if I go backwards again, that will be p to the power of 2. And then if I get rid of all those variables, I have the negative 4, and that's being raised to the power of 2. So negative 4 to the power of 2 is negative 4 times negative 4, which is 16. And then I have the p squared and then the q squared. Okay, let's do one more here. Going backwards here, that will be q to the power of 3, and then p to the power of 3. And then if I go over there, I have the negative 4 to the power of 3. Alright, so negative 4 to the power of 3, ideally what that is really negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. And then you have your P3 and your Q3. And since you have an odd number of negative signs, your final answer will be negative. And 4 times 4 is 16. So that's 16. Then times it by 4 gives you 64. So negative 64, and then P cubed, and then Q cubed. Good. Okay, I'm going to do one more problem before I end the first part of this homework video guide here. So next question here, I have to use the power of a quotient law to simplify. There's a few ways you can do this, but really the 2 goes on to the x, so x to the power of 2, and then the 2 goes down there, which is y to the power of 2. And that's a very quick way to do that particular question. If you are not comfortable with distributing the power, I mean, you could also write this as a repeated multiplication, right? So if you think about repeated multiplication here, just expand it like that. And you get the same answer here, right? B times B times B is just B to the power of 3. And then 5 times 5 is 25, and 25 times 5 is 125. All right, so that's the same thing as just B cubed over 5 to the power of 3, right? It's the same idea, but those are some ways where you can do those particular questions there. Okay, so that's it for this first part of this homework video guide.